The views and opinions expressed are that of the individuals and are not the reflections of any Grand Masonic body. The goal in this video series is to enlighten the minds of our viewers with Masonic education for the modern Freemason, wherever they might be. Take due notice thereof and govern yourselves accordingly. This is Modern Working Tools, today's tools for the modern Freemason. I am your host, Brother Justice, broadcasting live from Barrington 522 in Barrington, Illinois.
Hello, I am Brother Justice here at Modern Working Tools, today's tools for the modern Freemason. And I have a very special guest with us, Bro.Charles Harper. This brother is a lecturer, he's a Masonic author, he's an educator, and he's someone that I really was looking forward to get on the program for some time. And I would like to bring forth Brother Charles. Charles, how are you?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. It's always an honor to have a fellow Illinois Freemason come on here and talk about, just what's going on in the craft in our jurisdiction. I think it's very important. And from what I was told, you're an elusive figure. You're not very easy to get a hold of. But I was told, I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to try my best. And I'm just honored.
Elusive?
That's what I heard. That's what I heard. But I'm honored to have you on here. And this is a very important topic that I feel needs to be addressed. This isn't an issue that we could just dance around lightly. This is a very serious issue that is going on in our fraternity. And a lot of people are getting pulled into this. So before I get started here, I would like to say a brief disclaimer pertaining to this episode in general.
Definitely.
Now, Freemasonry is in no way, shape, or form connected or related to any of the clandestine or criminal organizations and societies mentioned in this program. In this presentation, it aims to highlight the stark contrasts and parallels between ancient secret societies and how other organizations emulate similar themes, and Freemasonry and other societies adopted them into their own organizations and societies. And this segment serves to dispel some of the myths and conspiracies concerning Freemasonry. To the profane world, there's a lot of fallacies out there, and we look to clear the air and the confusion in the temple. But yeah, Freemasonry is no way, shape, or form connected to any of the organizations we're going to mention here tonight. We're here to highlight familiarities. I mean, Freemasonry has been around hundreds of years. There's going to be some copycats in that time.
More than a few, right?
Yes. So in our ritual, when you're taking your obligation, there's a little blurb about something about a clandestine lodge, not
Absolutely.
To be involved with a clandestine lodge.
Right.
Can we explain to our membership what is a clandestine lodge or clandestine Freemasonry?
So a clandestine lodge is, from the perspective of the Grand Lodge of Illinois, which we're both members, a clandestine lodge is simply a lodge that exists outside of the accepted regular Masonic practice. So what that would be in simple terms is the Grand Lodge of Illinois was created from existing lodges who were chartered by other previously existing Grand Lodges, Grand Lodge of Kentucky, Indiana, and the lodges that came together and formed the Grand Lodge of Illinois did that in a regular accepted practice. Clandestine lodges don't originate in that capacity. They will, you'll have a Grand Lodge simply form, and then the Grand Lodge will charter lodges. That's an irregular practice because Grand Lodges are formed from previously existing lodges chartered by other regularly formed Grand Lodges. So when we say clandestine, we're saying They are operating outside of the accepted regular practice of the wider known Freemasonry.
And in the wider known Freemasonry, there's something that we call a lineage, which it can be traced back, to the
Sure.
United Grand Lodge of England. A
Sure.
lot of clandestine lodges don't have this distinct lineage that can be traced back to 1717 or what have you. But before we get into this topic, let's give a little introduction about yourself, your Masonic background, and a little bit about what makes you such a great Freemason. I know you sent me a text earlier that you were laboring in the quarries, educating. You're someone who is definitely, I look to as like, a mentor to a lot of Freemasons coming up.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And I just want to know your backstory. It'll be awesome, brother.
I've been told I'm complicated. So my journey in Freemasonry began in 2004. And at that time, I, like most people, were not educated or unaware about the difference between a regularly constituted lodge of Freemasons and a clandestine lodge of Freemasons. And so in Kankakee, I moved out to Kankakee. My father is a Prince Hall Mason, and we had not been in contact for some time, and as young people do. And I saw I identify as Black. My father's Black, and that's how I identify. And there is, and when we, and this is what I do professionally as far as diversity and inclusion is understanding groups. And typically we tend to move towards the group that we identify with. It's an affinity bias, right? And so my next door neighbor, black man wearing the square and compass on his jacket, I did what we're told to do, to be one, ask one. So I asked them, and in about, I would say about 9 months' time after an interview, going through asking, could I be one? I was finally initiated into the craft in a clandestine lodge, St. Elmo's Lodge 70A in Kankakee, Illinois. Now, I had no idea it was clandestine. All of the guys that are members, in fact, there are still members of that lodge that exist today. All of them were, to me, very good men. And we had to memorize not just ritual as we do for the Grand Lodge of Illinois. When I went through the Scottish Rite degrees, we literally had to memorize all of those degrees as well. Obviously, they were irregular, but we still had to memorize all of that. And our conversations would be constantly about exploring the meanings of the symbols in Freemasonry. So I learned a lot, actually, from my years of being a clandestine Freemasonry, and that was from 2004 to 2010. I actually learned a lot of Freemasonry, book Freemasonry. And so it wasn't until I ran into my father at a Shriners event. I wasn't there in Shriner regalia. It was at the Arabic Temple 44 in Chicago, and they have it open to the public. And my father just happened to be bartending that night, so I went and visited him, and I told him the lodge that I was a member of, and he says, like, because I had my Masonic medallion on, and he said, "What's the name of your lodge?" And I told him, he's like, "I've never heard of that lodge." And I said, "Oh, well, we're a Scottish Rite lodge." And he says, "You're a what?" And that gave me an inkling that something was not entirely right, because why would he not know? My father is a 33rd degree Prince Hall PHA Mason. So why would he not know about this Black lodge that was in Kankakee when there's another Prince Hall affiliated lodge in Kankakee, True Lodge? So that started me on the road of asking questions. And the more questions that I asked, the more hostile or defensive, I should say, not hostile, more defensive the answers were coming to me. And amounted to was a racial foundation to it, a justification, if you will, as to why they should exist, and that Black lodges shouldn't have to answer to white lodges for their permission to exist. Now, this intrigued me because in one respect, historically, that is a moral justification, right? If we look at how the United States was formed, we look at the institution of slavery as it was, the era after Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow. And that's not to say that the North was not complicit in this creation, but to just understand why that moral legitimacy exists then and still now amongst these clandestine Freemasonries. They have a legitimate gripe as to why they won't join regular Freemasonry. They have been excluded. Well, Blacks in general have been excluded, and you know, when Prince Hall was made a Freemasonry in 1775, and then went on to form Grand Lodges, that was because he couldn't join a lodge under the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. They did not accept people of color or Negroes at that time. So, you know, I don't frown upon everybody who is a clandestine Freemasonry. I don't frown upon them because I get it, right? Now there's a part where you say, well, that may be true that you have that moral justification, but you do have Prince Hall Freemasonry if you feel that it's a racial issue for you, and as a racial distrust, there is Prince Hall Freemasonry that you can join. And then they'll further create their more moral legitimacy, saying, well, Prince Hall still had to be accepted by white people to be a Freemasonry, and this goes back to him being initiated in the Irish Lodge, as it were. So, you know, that was my beginning in Freemasonry. That was my coming to understand that I was in a clandestine lodge. I had to explore why the sentiment was there, why that moral justification existed, and allowed them to feel comfortable and even confident continuing in this path. Now, by 2009, I was trying to figure out a way. I was a past master at that time of that lodge, and I was trying to figure out how can this lodge of good men become regular Freemasons. And not everybody saw eye to eye, even with all the evidence. We learned that when people are convicted to a belief system, it almost does not matter what facts you show them. They're going to remain convicted to that belief until they choose to change. So I chose to become a regular Freemasonry, petitioned Kankakee Lodge number 389, and it was the ritual was one of the most beautiful things I've ever gone through. Highly different than the physical hazing that came along with my entry into clandestine Freemasonry.
Okay, now for people who don't understand, there's a term called healing, Masonic healing. It is when a clandestine Mason joins a regular Masonic organization, like mainstream. Like for instance, in Illinois, every state usually has two Grand Lodges. It's the Prince Hall, and then the mainstream Grand Lodge.
Right.
So in our jurisdiction in Illinois, there's two Grand Lodges, and if you didn't get initiated by a subordinate lodge from the Grand Lodge, it's clandestine. It's considered clandestine. So one would have to join a regular lodge to get the Masonic healing. And another thing with Prince Hall Freemasonry is that there's another organization called PHO. And,
Prince Hall Origin.
Yes, and a lot of mainstream Freemasonry, a lot of people in Freemasonry, they get that confused. They don't know the difference between either or. There's always a question. And I've seen this, I'm going to be honest and say, when people mention Freemasonic brothers of color, there's always a question of if he's regular or clandestine, simply because the color of his skin, there's always that lingering question, is he regular? Where are they
Sure.
meeting? You know,
Sure.
and it's just ridiculous. So this episode,
That's interesting, isn't it?
it is. We want to clear the air here. Throughout history, there's always been, and this is regardless of color, there's always been people who were excluded from
Absolutely.
Freemasonry, and they
Absolutely.
wanted to start their own thing. We talked about Prince Hall. This is a figure in African American history that's not really talked about in history books. You hear about other
Not at
people,
all.
Booker T, and you hear about Frederick Douglass, things like
Right.
that. You don't hear about this man. This man literally changed lives, and he's still relevant today. And we're still talking about him today. This man was not a slave. This was a black man who had his freedom. He had some money, and he loved Freemasonry in his heart.
Yes.
He was a Mason before he became a Mason. He was a Mason.
Yes.
And this was a brother who desired more light. And he didn't let racist people stop him. He was a man that was so determined to become a Freemason that he did it by any means necessary. And he went and secured himself a UD under dispensation to form, what was it, Africa Lodge?
African Lodge. It was originally African Lodge 331.
Okay.
But it eventually became African Lodge 459.
And to my understanding, they were limited in their capacity when they first formed. They weren't allowed to.
They were only allowed to bury their dead and to open lodge, conduct business.
Okay. Now with Prince Hall, there's some states that still do not recognize Prince Hall, and there's been a long debate over amity between Grand Lodges. You recognize this Prince Hall Grand Lodge. Well, we don't recognize you because of that. So it's very confusing. And I think there's only a few states left that don't recognize.
Yeah, it's dwindling slowly but surely.
Dwindling for sure.
Yeah, slowly but surely.
But yeah, we have a brother who petitioned our lodge who is a Prince Hall Mason, and he did have to take the degrees again.
Absolutely.
And he wanted to see them really bad. He was like, yeah, I really want to go through this the original.
I was the same way. I got initiated in Kankakee Lodge number 389, I was the exact same way. I wanted to, well, we didn't have a choice, but I was excited to go through those degrees. Prince Hall affiliated Freemasonry, though, like you said, is different. There's a choice that they can make, that they will what is called healing, and they can do that with one individual, where the individual is re-obligated, and I don't know why the screen's coming up here, or they can, hey, what happened to my screen here? There we go. Or they can, so I was talking about healing. Let me recap that. So the healing, they can either do an individual, or they can do an entire lodge. They can heal over an entire lodge. And typically it's at the discretion of the Grand Master, the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Master, or sometimes is left to the Deputy Director. I believe they're called the Deputy Director. And what will happen is they will simply be re-obligated with taking the obligation again. But in mainstream Freemasonry, none of that is recognized, and you literally have to go through the entire degrees over again.
Now, at the point of the reason for these groups, we talked about exclusion into the society, so people kind of
Sure.
left to form their own. You also see these instances pop up in history with Jewish brothers. For instance, that's how the grotto was formed, because
Absolutely.
a lot of Jews weren't allowed into the shrine at the time.
Yes. Yes.
And then even a lot of Irish brothers, they had a hard time. Irish people
they faced a lot of discrimination.
They were at a low level of the totem pole in society at the time.
The caste system, as it were.
Right.
And what's interesting, even the Grand Lodge of Illinois, in one of its published social activities, and this is, I believe, in the 1830s and 40s, they were this is in 1923, I believe, they were encouraging minstrel shows.
Wow.
I'm not sure if your listeners know what a minstrel show is, but it shows that whites used to put on that was mocking the stereotyped perception of Black people at the time. They would paint themselves in blackface, they would paint their lips bright red, and they would wear white gloves,
Like
imitating
the
a lot of
the Sambo
right,
figure.
absolutely, imitating a lot of the position in society that Blacks could get at the time. What's interesting is if you look at old Mickey Mouse films, you'll see the same characterization because that's what they knew at the time.
I was at the antique store the other day, and I seen these little porcelain figures where they had Mammy and they had the guy, the butler, looked like Buddy from Django. You know, it's like wow, you know, this was history back then. This was the societal norm to exclude certain people. But we do live in a different day and age where, you know, things aren't fixed, things aren't perfect. We still have a lot of these issues, but technology is kind of blurring the lines a little bit, and people are tuned into different things, and people are definitely more informed. They're also disinformed too. You know, that there comes that element, you know, with it. But there's a lot more information out there.
Definitely.
And I would like to highlight a little bit about, you know, clandestine Freemasonry on this episode because it's very rarely talked about. Like you had mentioned that when you joined a clandestine lodge, there was hazing. This is something that regular mainstream Freemasonry, the Freemasonry that we're a part of, we don't allow. we do not allow horseplay.
In any capacity.
Right. So a lot of these clandestine lodges, it's very prevalent to hear stories of brothers being beaten. Also, you know, financial, you know, they're drained financially, exuberant prices.
And I would say something about that though, because the financial situation, and don't get me wrong, there are some clandestine organizations who are predatory, right? But I don't like to mass generalize, because when we mass generalize, now we're being prejudiced. We're prejudicing ourselves,
right?
You know, and casting an entire group of people as if they're, you know, singular, right? And they're not. My lodge that I was a member of as a clandestine Freemasonry was we did have high dues fees, but it wasn't a money-making venture. We did not have, and it's similar with Prince Hall Freemasonry, the dues tend to be higher than your mainstream Grand Lodges. Now that's historically, there's historically a reason for that. There was not enough funding to put into Prince Hall lodges. Disproportionate wealth, you know, relative to demographics played a large role in the inability for Prince Hall Masons to have these wondrous Grand Lodges and subordinate lodges. And so clandestine Freemasonry finds itself to a large extent in that same position, where they have simply formed a lodge, and it's almost like starting a business. And you see a lot of them fail because they don't have that financial backing to sustain themselves. And then people lose interest because the clandestine lodge, most of them are not teaching the ritual as we are required to learn it and then practice it, and, you know, and have it memorized and so forth. They're not required to do that in a large sense. So I don't want to, you know, place clandestine Freemasonries in a catch-all category, making it seem that all of them are, you know, predatory, financially predators, because that's not the case. But there are organizations such as your international groups such as that are predatory. So they do exist out there, but just not all of them.
Yeah, I heard some of these clandestine groups actually, they do good things for their community.
Oh, we gave out scholarships. We did the Thanksgiving baskets. You know, at Easter, I've dressed up as the Easter bunny. And we do Easter egg hunts. So that's why I don't like to cast them all. Yeah, they're just bad. Not necessarily. They may not be regular Freemasons, and they may not be able to sit in lodge with us, but in some capacities, they're doing the work of Freemasonry. They're just not recognized by us.
And that's a lot of groups. You know,
Absolutely.
and the problem I have with the term clandestine masonry is that, like, when people think of that, they automatically think African American. There's almost like
Absolutely.
a
It's
stigma
not.
attached to it. There's Ladroit Humane,
Yes.
co-ed
Yes.
orders. There's French orders that admit atheists and
Sure.
women, and you know, there's these clandestine orders. They do not have any bounds racially. I mean, this is from different
Not at all.
countries. I mean, it could be anyone. It could be a white lodge. It could be, you know, so
Your
this isn't,
co-Masonic lodges. Absolutely.
and they're very expensive as well.
Absolutely.
And so there's an organization. I believe they do publish the magazine. It's kind of like in the vein of like the Masonic Journal or the Philolades, but they're called the Phylaxis Society. They
Alexis, yes.
great Masonic research material. It's like an academic sort of magazine that discusses Prince Hall Freemasonry. They publish a list annually about the current list of bogus lodges. It's kind of like a harsh word, but that's what they call it. List of bogus Masonic organizations in Illinois. If people don't know, in our jurisdiction is very strange. Not in a bad way, but in a sort of a melting pot sort of way. It's very strange because we have so much going on here. We've had, you know, cult groups. We've had, you know, organized crime, mafia.
Illinois has been a hotbed.
Various religious organizations, quasi-religious organizations.
Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
we have, you know, we got Nation of Islam. We have so many things, so many groups here. I just don't want to peg one, but we have so many.
A lot of them.
Yes. And in Illinois, it's very difficult because, you know, it's almost like Chicago is like a hotbed for clandestine Masonic orders. Detroit as well. You see it in Detroit, but in Chicago, it's just ridiculous. Now, this list, I'll put the picture when I edit the video, but this list is very long, and you could tell some of these groups are clandestine because of the names.
Sure.
They have very grandiose, big, long, lengthy names. I don't want to call out any of these groups either, because as Masons, we should respect these groups too. We don't have to exchange Masonic secrets, but we have to be nice and cordial and set the standard of what being a brother is. So I'll name out a few of these groups, but I do not know their situation. I don't want to, you know, talk down on them. It's all brotherly love at the end of the day. But, you know, some of these groups have really long names. Like, for instance, this one is Supreme General Council of Sovereign Grand Inspectors General Knight Commanders of Holy Temple of King Solomon of the 33rd and last degree of the AASR. Most Worshipful Lodge Redemption #1, Sovereign Grand Lodge of Illinois. Melchizedek Grand Lodge, AF&AM. Supreme Grand Lodge, Modern Free and Accepted Masons of the World. Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite Masons. Some of them, Black Masonic Network Incorporated.
Absolutely.
You see incorporations, LLCs, Original Supreme Council of the 33rd and last degree of Freemasonry, United States of America and its territories. King David United Supreme Council of Ancient
and there'll be a new one added to that list by the end of September.
Right. It's a really big list.
So I wanted to understand, because they just continued to pop up, you know.
Right.
And when I went back to college to get my undergrad degree, part of it was I minored in cultural anthropology, because I wanted to understand what is it about human beings and groups wanting to join groups regardless of facts. Why do we do that, you know? And what I came to understand was, you know, human beings, we're social creatures. We most of us, unless we're true introverts, we desire to be a part of a group.
Tribalistic.
Tribalism, absolutely. You know, as long as you're not, you know, trying to take somebody else's woman or eat their food. Tribes typically weren't fighting. But yeah, you're talking about tribalism. So now you have to look at the foundational factors of why these groups continue to form. Why do they continue to be successful when you could take all the members of all those groups, all those that qualify, and have such a boost to either the Grand Lodge of Illinois or the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Illinois' membership? What prohibits those individuals from saying, I'm going to go over here to Prince Hall and so I can travel, so I can be regular? What does that mean to them? And is that enough to get them to leave the comfort of that tribe that they're a part of, where they have that trust and they have a person that they call brother that they can call in a jam, and that person will be there. And these individuals don't stand in judgment. There's something to say about that, and to analyze us as regular Freemasons, what aren't we doing? Rather than say that they should simply not be a part of these groups, what is it that's so attractive to these groups that they're not attracted to join our jurisdiction?
Now, again,
it's definitely not the money. I think the last time I know I have a lifetime membership, time I paid dues, I believe it was $30 a year.
Wow.
Whereas when I was a clandestine Freemasonry, it was $30 a month.
Wow.
And it wasn't the money.
So we could use this as a segue to touch on another topic that's intimately related. In Chicago, it's no secret that Chicago is a hotbed for organized crime. Different gangs, different sets.
Elected or behind the scenes.
Right. So I grew up in Chicago, and growing up, you get acclimated real quick to what's out there. There's certain places that you can't go, and in school you see things, and there's graffiti on the walls with gang signs, and you see all these things in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some parallels between what we would call organized crime and what we would see in a fraternal society such as ours. Now, again, back to the disclaimer, these are totally two unlike things. Yeah. However, I've noticed that there's a theme that certain street gangs sort of emulate their structure and sort of the symbolism and sort of the way they operate after our old fraternity style of how we do things. Again, we do good things. They do good things and bad things for their community to survive.
Right.
They have to survive. Right. They live by their own rules and justice.
And it didn't used to be that way with gangs.
Right.
Gangs used to be a positive thing in the community.
Right.
Unfortunately, like all things, you get the element that comes in and it augments the purpose of the organization. But to your question, I think that it's important to recognize the longevity of Freemasonry's existence with its structure, right? You have the Grand Lodge, which is the umbrella, right? The senior management, if you will, of all these subordinate or satellite businesses, effectively what they are. And I think if you look at that structure and you look at, the government of the United States, you look at, from federal to state level, you see all these eerie similarities, and they're there for a reason, because what Freemasonry has done with its establishment, with its rules and lodge, how the lodges are ran, what we do when we have disputes, securing the lodge and all of these things. Well, these are time-tested methods of operation, and not just for the brotherhood, for those bondings, but for the business of Freemasonry to run. And so when you look at regular businesses now, you find the same similarities. You're going to find a secretary. you're going to find a financial secretary or your accountant. You're going to find membership that pays into the pot, as it will, and then you're going to have to pay bills out. You're going to have a board of directors that either vote or regulate. So these similarities in how you run a successful business, which Freemasonry has shown us how to do to a large extent, I think that is what you see in all these other organizations, whether you're talking about the gangs that exist in the Chicagoland area, whether you talk about the old gangs, the old gangsters, they used to exist in the Chicago. Some would say they never went away. Even the opposite of Freemasonry, your Ku Klux Klan organization operated in the same capacity. In fact, when you had the golden age of fraternalism, you probably had more Ku Klux Klan members than you had Freemasonries.
Same with the Chinese fraternal organizations. They've been running for thousands of years. And so I'm a weirdo. I like to study, sort of the taboo things, like criminology, the mafia, secret societies, cults, cult leaders. Like I'm weird into stuff like that. Aliens, you name it. Anyways,
you're the person I'll call when I got a question about that stuff.
Gotcha. So to my research in criminology and street gangs, and there's websites that you can search, Chicago gang history or whatever. I don't know the precise websites, but there's information out there. How these groups got started and things like that is interesting to me. You see a lot of parallels. Again, you see a dues structure. There's dues cards. There's regalia that these members have. Also, a sense of amity, who you could visit and who you could have fraternal relations with. Right. And also, affiliation. If you're a gang member and you go to a new set or a new environment, they let you know who's your friends now and who's got your back and who to pay the dues to or what have you. And also, on the symbolism, a lot of times you see gang graffiti and you see things like similars. You see a pyramid, or you might see a Star of David, or you see a lot of familiarity in the symbolism as well. And I'm also going to put like a slideshow of photos. I'll put like the first half will be some criminal photos, and then the last half will be some Masonic photos. I'm not gonna mention any of the organizations. If you know, but I'm going to show you the difference between.
You'll see pyramids.
Right.
The cane. You'll see Islamic symbolism.
Right.
You'll see all that in there, and I think that it's almost when if you look back at Freemasonry, when Egyptology was the big thing. Right. And then you started seeing the symbolism of Egyptology in the lodges. Lodges started springing up with the bigger pillars, and you had this influence of Egypt. I think there's something to say about even in the gangs that exist now and have existed for a while. There is that desire to connect to something that seems magical, that seems ancient, that seems to empower us through connecting us with our past.
Right.
And I think that's the commonality between them, though we use the symbols for different reasons.
Right. Now, in Freemasonry, there's a lot of conspiracy stuff online. I mean, you do a Google search, you're going to find it. On
the rock, baby.
if you look online, we're the Illuminati. We sacrifice people. We're behind every election. We control the world. And people are really adamant in this belief. Like, they really believe it. To their core, they believe Freemasonry is evil. It's satanic. It correlates to organized crime and street gangs. But I'm telling people, hey, there's something called clandestine masonry, and they look just like a regular lodge, and they do things to people, and they go home and they write about it, but it's not us. The experience was from a different organization. So it's important to let people know what's out there. For instance, that meme that I seen of the new challenge, the crate challenge online.
The crate challenge. You know what? If anybody listens to this, please don't do that crate challenge. That is just That is just not smart.
But I've seen like 4 or 5 versions of the same meme where they like
Oh,
crop a Masonic photo into the meme
sure.
where it's like the pyramid and they're
Yeah.
climbing up the Masonic ladder and people are counting the numbers of the steps and
Oh my goodness.
it is
Yeah.
wild.
You know, in the absence of knowledge, human beings, we will be extremely creative with some things. But I think I want to give some attention to why I think that these conspiracies are so believable, right? If you think about, and I know we were just talking about tribalism, but if you think about the primal function of our brain, right? Our brain is designed to recognize that might hurt us. You know, we are extremely motivated by fear, although the motivation doesn't last. We're motivated by fear. And when we can't figure out something, to not fear it will create what we deem logical, so it will make sense to us. And so the problem with that is that unless you are a thorough academic researcher, you know, and you know how to force yourself to be objective when researching something, you know, you're going to be dazzled by what seems logical to you. And when a real Freemasonry says, well, no, I went through the degrees, you know, you have never stepped inside of a lodge, they'll still believe that conspiracy theory over the person standing in front of them.
I've even seen some people who originally had a negative stance on Freemasonry kind of change after they got acclimated to what it was. I know this is a clandestine organization, but it was very interesting a few years ago to see that photo of Minister Farrakhan. He joined that Memphis Mizraim Lodge,
Right.
and then he was talking good things about it afterwards. So there's still hope. There's still
Wait,
hope for some people.
So I don't know if you've seen the video. There's a previous video of him talking about Freemasons.
I seen it.
He says, you know, trust the Black Freemasons, but not the white Freemasons. But there's not a difference. But in his world,
right,
his worldview, there is a difference.
Right.
Historically, his relatability to trust is different.
Right.
And it's when we challenge the validity of his trust is when you give oxygen to the conversation.
You know, we can't let some of the bad apples, you know, ruin the whole fraternity. I mean, like in Italy, that mafia lodge, P2, where, you know, members of the mafia were kind of hiding behind this lodge, laundering money, things like that.
Laundering money from the bank,
Yeah,
even the Illuminati, they went out, they disbanded in I believe 1793 in Bavaria. And there were Freemasons that were a member of that Illuminati council. And still, you know, you look and the idea of the Illuminati still exists because it's something you can't disprove unless you're a researcher, and who listens to researchers really?
The things grew. It's like the ancient mysteries, the initiation schools of the past. They've always captured the imagination of people in all generations of society, even today. Even joining a street gang, you know, I've seen videos on YouTube where people are like, hey, I'm going to join a street gang today and I'm going to get jumped in or whatever. And that feeling to them is everything to them. That feeling of belonging, that feeling of I'm a part of something bigger than myself. I have protection. I have a crew. And I can make money now. I could, you know, it's a part of the man, you know, growing up into that role. Women have their own biological process that lets them know they're a woman.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
I think it's more than that. I think it's more than that. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs definitely comes into play here, right? The pyramid, right? You know, what if our lower level needs are not being met? What if we're not eating and somebody comes and brings us food?
Right.
What if we don't have clothing and shelter and someone provides that for us?
Primordial. It's as simple as that. Shelter, you know, food.
Absolutely. And so when these things are provided, Now, what are you looking for? That sense of belonging. You want to belong with something.
Right.
And so the desire to belong to something is so strong that,
Right.
you know, you see, you know, if you're a gang, you want to join a gang, you see them protecting each other, and people are eating and they're having fun. You say, wow, I want to be protected.
And
I want to
also,
have fun.
and also in the street too, like a lot of people have friends, but if you're not a member of this group or this gang or this set or whatever, you know, your connection is it stops. You know, you're not on the level with your brothers. You know,
Right.
they don't put you on as much. They don't reveal things to you.
Sure.
You know, so a lot of people want to be on the level with their community and their
Yeah.
environment.
So they do what they need to do to get there. Now, I would never advocate for that.
Right.
but
Same.
that is, I think it illustrates how strong that sense of belonging is for people. And when you go back to clandestine Freemasonry and why, I mean, look at our memberships.
Right.
And we want to ask, well, why are these individuals in these clandestine groups and not joining our groups?
Right.
We have to say, well, you know, how tight, how connected are we in our lodge?
Right.
How are we facilitating that connection? It can't just be the parking lot after lodge or the afterglow when everybody can't make it, and then we're sitting in lodge and we're conducting business. What creates that inertia for people to want to come there and feel that sense of connection? It's not just the symbol, and it's not just the education. It's purposeful inclusion that's going on. You know, these gangs, these clandestine lodges, they're doing purposeful inclusion.
I've heard people swear to me that they have relatives and friends that were incarcerated and they became Masons in prison, and there's Freemasons in prison. I've heard it all. And I'm just like, what? And it just blew my mind that people have, you know, took an identity to Freemasonry, even if it's in a clandestine way. People still identify with our symbolism, with our beliefs.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we need to start reaching more people, and not, you know, just people, but specifically people in the urban communities. We need to have outreach. We need to have, you know, public awareness that we're out here, we're doing good things. It's very unfortunate that, you know, we're dwindling our numbers, you know, membership's declining, but yet these groups are springing up all the time, new members, younger Masons in their groups. They're doing good things for their community. It's you know, outside looking in, you know, everyone has their reason for it, but it's just very disheartening to see, you know, where we could be heading and where they could be heading, and they could potentially rival us and outnumber us. It's happened in the past, you know, Sir No, Scottish Rite, and all these other groups.
Absolutely. I think the biggest to the existence of clandestine Freemasonry isn't just your lodge or my lodge going into areas where there are a higher number of marginalized communities there. It's going to take a collaborative effort between both Grand Lodges, and not the Grand Lodge line, because the Grand Lodge lines always communicate. We're talking the subordinate lodge level, where you'll have lodges in one jurisdiction turn away people because they're not the same. I met a past master once who said that if a person wasn't white, heterosexual, and a Republican, there's no way they let them into their lodge. You know, so and you and I might find it humorous, but in the same token, that ideology exists out there, and it only takes one black ball to preclude a person from becoming a member.
And
we have to say
this ideology destroys the harmony in the lodge. It destroys the camaraderie, the brotherhood. I've seen lodges where this has unfortunately happened, where people are excluded for maybe their political affiliations or their religious beliefs or sexual orientation. I've seen it. There's a lodge in our district that blackballs everyone. That, you know, and it's like, it's like, what's going on? You know,
they're hiding behind the ballot box. You know, and let me be clear. This is not to say that a person with a Republican conviction doesn't work in the lodge, where in fact the lodge should be composed of the most diverse array of individuals.
Right.
Diversity inclusion, the work that I do, it is about bringing the most diverse, qualified individuals in a room to work on a problem, and we're all different and come from different schools of thinking, and the collaboration is both honeymooning and storming all the time. You know, you're back and forth with it, but the product that you create is better often than if you had a homogeneous type group. And I learned that from Freemasonry.
Right.
But what I saw as I traveled was a homogeneous type lodges where if you didn't fit into the culture of the lodge because you were different in whatever respect, then you were precluded from membership. And I think that's what works against the inclusion practice of Freemasonry, is the idea that you're investigating this individual. And I think individuals go beyond investigating whether they're just a good man. They're investigating how this person thinks beyond just simply intelligence.
Every great corporation, they pay millions, possibly billions of dollars into getting different creatives, different thinkers into like a think tank. You know, how can we take this branding to the next level? How can we take our marketing to the next level? How can we progress as a corporation for the next 100 years?
Yes.
And this exclusion I think, is a detriment to our fraternity, because people are going to leave and join another group or start another group, or it's happened, and we will lose members that way. And when we have these different brains and ideas coming together, it's going to make the fraternity better in the long term.
Yeah. So it's going to take doing joint degrees, not just once a year, and then putting it on Facebook that it was done. It's going to take active marketing, more than just the Grand Lodge of Illinois website, and the markings on the building, or you know, being at a fish fry or whatever. It's going to take active marketing to change the perception that our institution is singular in its focus of the type of people that they want for membership. And likewise for the Prince Hall affiliated lodges. Right.
And unfortunately, we're only just one jurisdiction. This is an issue that we're going to need multiple jurisdictions in on it together. This is bigger than just Illinois. We need the whole United States on board with this. We need to save our fraternity from, you know, these other groups and our members leaving for whatever reason. But yeah, it's just crazy right now. Now let's get into you know closing here. We did talk a lot about, you know, different things. People are probably like, whoa, what's going on? I need to do my Googles. How can a person spot a clandestine lodge? I mean, I know that there's something called the ancient landmarks. Can we explain a little bit about, you know, what a Freemason could look out for to see if he's in the right lodge?
Yeah. So, you know, landmarks are different from Grand Lodge to Grand Lodge.
Right.
You know, some don't even use landmarks. Some have 46 of them. Here is what I'll tell you what I do. If one, I never judge because of their race what they might be, because clandestine Freemasonry comes in different genders and different ethnicities, nationalities, and so forth. What I would do, I always, when they reach out to shake my hand, pre-COVID, when they reach out to shake my hand, I just shake their hand, and I ask them what lodge they are a member of. I don't do the catechisms, I don't do the games. I just ask them what lodge they're a member of. And if they say a lodge that I don't recognize, I'll ask them what the name of their Grand Lodge is. And at that point, if they're not saying the Grand Lodge of Illinois, Ancient, Free, and Accepted Masons, if they're not saying the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of, you know, whatever jurisdiction, at that point, most likely they're clandestine Freemasonry. And I am going to tell them, well, you know, have a good day and, you know, travel well. I'm not going to confront him about his affiliation at that point, because that's not the place and time. That person met me. I told him the name of my lodge and Grand Lodge. If he thinks I'm cool, he might want to exchange numbers, and we can do that as well. And at that point is when I'll get into educating. But when we're just walking down the street to recognize a clandestine Freemason, unless you ask them, it's very difficult to just spot it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll put it like that.
At the end of the day, we're brand ambassadors, so it's good to be polite and respectful.
Even the clandestine Freemasons
right.
are brand ambassadors.
Right. Now, I don't have the official list of Illinois landmarks, but here's some things that I kind of look for. I look for, do they have the letter G above the worshipful master?
Well, I would say you got to watch that too.
Oh yeah, but I'm not done though. I got a few more though. These could be give or take too, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
Do they have the Bible or volume of sacred law with the square and compasses on the altar? 3 burning tapers? Do they have a charter recognized by United Grand Lodge England? Is there women in the lodge?
And you're talking once you've gone to a lodge to visit, you've been invited to visit.
Right.
I think before you even get to those, a person, if you can't find the name of their Grand Lodge,
right,
in our registry,
true.
If you're in Illinois and it's anything other than the Grand Lodge of Illinois or the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Illinois, I'm not coming to visit your lodge. I'm just not. We can talk about those landmarks, the 3 burning tapers and so forth. But I think if you're in a lodge at that point, you already know you're not supposed to be there.
Right. But an older brother could potentially,
It has happened.
Right.
It's happened. If the door is tiled and that tiler doesn't challenge you.
Right. If it's the 3rd degree and you see the guy actually get a punch in the face.
They actually use a real gavel like they did me.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I heard
that's a problem.
I don't want to mention anyone's name, but I heard a story of another brother whom we might know. I know he's in Illinois Freemasonry. He joined a clandestine order as well, and they hazed him really bad in the middle of Chicago. He got like hit in the back or something like that. Really, he has like damage from what happened.
My lodge, Pleiades Lodge number 478. The sitting master now was a member previously of a clandestine lodge.
I think we're talking about the same person. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And he and I started, and I remember our first encounter was volatile. Wow. But I was very, I took my time with him and I educated him. And after he had finished my book, he was like, we need to meet. And I think I met him and about 8 other gentlemen from that organization, and they all left.
And this brother is very active today.
Oh,
he is on it. Yeah, he's a beast.
He's everywhere.
Right. Right.
Philip is everywhere.
Yeah. So
good job. I think that's a testament to recognizing what he was in, and don't get it twisted. He had some significant bonds with those gentlemen.
So it's
very difficult to leave. Yeah.
It's like you're leaving behind your family, your neighborhood,
you actually, a lot of these gentlemen have actual family members in the lodge with them.
It's like being excommunicated from
3 generations.
Wow.
How do you leave that?
That's tough.
I think it comes down to what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I wanted to never be denied from a lodge. I wanted to never be denied in the same capacity that, I've obtained these degrees, and I didn't want to be without knowledge.
Often tried, never denied.
Never denied and willing to be tried again.
Right.
I never wanted to be without knowledge. And so one of the big things for me joining regular Freemasonry is to not be denied. Mm. I want to be able to go wherever the knowledge is without anyone getting in my way.
Mm.
And that's what
Powerful.
that dues card represented to me.
It's powerful, very powerful. I think this is a great discussion. I definitely can't wait to finish editing and I put photos in there. This is going to be great. Brother Charles, I really appreciate you coming on and touching some light on this issue that's not really talked about often.
Sure.
And I really appreciate your time. In closing here, is there any things that you would like to plug? You know, where can we find your work? I know you got some books out there. Whatever you'd like to plug.
I'm working on some things in my position. So I'm a diversity and inclusion manager for an agency called MHMR of Tarrant County, and I've researched. My dissertation from my PhD is on diversity and inclusion and how the methods of it don't work. And right now I am authoring a book that the agency will be publishing.
Wow.
Is a new strategy to doing diversity and inclusion without focusing on our differences.
Wow. That's powerful.
Without focusing on our differences. And what's interesting is every Freemason who's studied, when they read this, they will see Freemasonry all in it without Freemasonry in it. It's the oldest school of wisdom.
Right.
And so I think what I would say too is to those Freemasons who are enjoying membership in these clandestine groups, I get it. I understand. There is a bond. There is a feeling of security there. But when we talk about being a Freemason and taking ourselves from that rough ashlar to the smooth ashlar, you have to say, where is the knowledge that I need in order to accomplish this task? And it is not going to be found in the libraries. To a large extent, what people are looking for is not going to be found just in discussions. You're going to have to get a regular membership so that you can go sit in the places where these scholars are sharing information over a sandwich at lunch after a conference and start finding these deep vaults of wisdom. And then you start to realize, as Socrates said, I have, all that I know is that I know nothing.
Right.
And I think that's when you have gotten to the place where you're ready to learn, is when you realize that you don't know anything.
A closed mind is never certain.
Never. What did they say on Avatar, that movie Avatar? It is hard to fill a cup that is already full.
Well, Brother Charles, I really appreciate you coming on. Maybe we could have you back at another time. That would be awesome. Whenever your book is out, that would be great.
I appreciate it.
Again, thanks to everyone watching this tonight. I hope it was informative. I hope that if you're watching this and you're a member of a clandestine organization, to kind of think about some of the topics we touched on and try to do a little bit more research, ask more questions. An informed Mason is a better Mason, and we want to make sure that you're set up for success and not failure. So again, thank you, Brother Charles. I'm Brother Justice signing off. Modern Working Tools, today's tools for the modern Freemason. We hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Peace be with you all.
Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this program.